Hello and welcome back. This is Dr. Shane Ogle and we'll be going over our first chapter for anatomy and physiology. Alright, so this will be the introduction to the human body. First, we need to know a few definitions. Anatomy is going to be the study of the structures of the body. Physiology will be the study of the functions of those structures and how each part is going to work together. Dissection, which we'll be doing in lab, is going to be carefully cutting apart those body structures. Now, so examples. Anatomy would be looking at, say, the stomach, knowing the different parts and pieces of the stomach, knowing of how the stomach is shaped, knowing where it is located in the body. The physiology would be looking at each of those cells that produce specific secretions to cause a reaction within the stomach. So how that stomach is going to function, say when we eat a protein or eat a fat or a carbohydrate, and looking at how the stomach is going to deal with those. Now we have a few levels of the structural organization in the body. First we have chemical, then cellular, tissue, organ system, and organismal. So at the lowest level, we have the chemical. So this is going to be the atoms that make up each individual molecule that we see. Those molecules, once they combine, will create a cell. Those cells will combine, so you have several different types of cells combining to create a tissue. From there, multiple types of tissues create an organ, and multiple organs create a system. And from there, once you add up all those systems, you have an organism. So these next few slides are just going to be going more into detail with that. So chemical level, of course, cells. Now tissues. Tissue has its own chapter, which will be the next chapter we discuss, which will be chapter 4. So we have 4 basic types of tissue found all throughout the body. Now, they do not have the exact same function, but they have the same principles. So if you see an epithelial tissue, it's going to work pretty similar to other epithelial tissues. It has a few different functions that we'll talk about in chapter 4. Connective tissue. There are a ton of different types of connective tissue, and we will be going into those in depth in the next chapter. But an example of connective tissue would be something like bone. You don't really think of it as a connective tissue, but it is. Then you have muscular tissue. We all think of skeletal muscle, so muscles that help us move our body, but we also have cardiac and smooth muscle that we'll talk about. And then nervous tissue, we have 2 different types that we'll discuss. Each of those types of tissues will have their own chapters. Okay, so epithelial tissue, just a quick overview here, but we will be covering the body surfaces and lining hollow organs and cavities and forming glands with these tissues. So that is what the main goal of these types of tissues are. Okay, so we will see more about what simple squamous versus stratified cuboidal means in the next chapter. Okay, connective tissue. Again, here are the examples of those. Embryonic, we lose the mucus connective tissue, but mesenchyme sticks around. It happens to be some of our stem cells that we help to repair and regrow parts of our body. Then mature connective, so we have loose, dense, cartilage, bone, and liquid. So cartilage we all know too good and well. We find those in joints for cushioning. All right, muscular tissue, again, skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. We will discuss those pretty good in depth in a few chapters. Nervous tissue, we have neurons and neuroglia. So with nervous tissue, this is going to be how we carry information from one body part to another. Neurons are going to be the ones that actually do this. Neuroglia are actually going to be the supportive cells and protective cells. So neuroglia, neuro for neuron, glia, glue, so neural glue. So they help hold the nervous system together. Organ level. So as you can guess, at the organ level, we're talking about organs here, each individual organ. So composed of 2 or more types of tissues. So examples: stomach, skin, bone, heart, liver, and brain. And obviously we have multiple organs that we will go over. So you add up a few organs, what do you get? An organ system. Okay, so when we look at specific systems, which we will be going over all of them this semester. The digestive system, for an example, we have multiple organs here. We've got salivary glands, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and then some accessory organs are going to be the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. Now, some of these we will see in multiple organ systems. Pancreas we'll see in the endocrine system, and in the respiratory system we will see the pharynx. So we will see those later on. Now, these are all the organ systems that we'll go over. It would be good for you to go over and kind of get an idea of what organs you can find in which system. So let's say the skeletal system, you're pretty good on knowing that the bones are found there. Okay, there's not a whole lot else there. The cardiovascular system, again, more of a simple as far as list of organs that are going to be included. You have heart and blood vessels. Now, the digestive system, as we went over, this has a little more to do, and so we have a lot more organ involved. Okay, at the organismal level, again, any living individual, and for this particular class, we will be talking about the human. Okay, so speaking of humans, characteristics of a living human organism, we have 6 defining characteristics. The main one we're going to be concerned with this class will be metabolism. Now, most of us think of metabolism as the way we use food, and that is correct, but we're not only just breaking down the food, which a lot of people think of, but we're also building complex substances from what we have broken down. So we have 2 parts to metabolism. Catabolism is going to be the breakdown of complex chemical substances, and anabolism will be the building up of complex chemical substances. So this will definitely be good to know for the quiz. Okay. Also, we have responsiveness. So the body's ability to adapt and detect changes, such as temperature. Movement. So we need to be able to move to stay alive. As you'll hear me say a lot throughout the class, most likely, movement is life. So if you don't move, usually you're not really living. Okay. Growth. So we need to be able to grow and repair cells that happen to be damaged. Differentiation kind of goes along with growth. Some cells need to be able to differentiate. So stem cells we need to develop into specific bone cells. We'll see that we have a few different ones. And if we cannot differentiate properly, this is where we have a breakdown in our systems. Other than that, reproduction. So if we do not reproduce, we cannot carry on the human race. So this is a pretty big distinguishing factor of an organism. All right, homeostasis. This is another big key definition that you'll definitely want to know for the quiz, but the condition of equilibrium in the body's internal environment due to the constant interaction of the body's many regulatory processes. So all this means is if we sense a change, we can adapt and overcome that change. So something such as temperature. If we notice that the temperature around us is becoming too cold, we need to be able to warm up, and vice versa. Okay, and one way we can do this is by body fluids. Oddly enough, body fluids are going to be a really big way that we can maintain homeostasis because they carry and house a lot of the different substances and ions that we need to do this. So we have intracellular fluid. This is just talking about the fluid found between cells. Then extracellular fluid. I'm sorry, I misspoke there. Intracellular will be the fluid within the cell. Extracellular fluid is going to be the fluid surrounding cells or found within different organs. So interstitial fluid, This is specifically between cells. Blood plasma, this is going to be in the blood vessels. Lymph, found within lymphatic vessels. We'll see this is mostly for immunity. Then cerebral spinal fluid, this is a big one whenever it comes to protection for the brain and spinal cord. Then synovial fluid, around and in joints. And then aqueous humor and vitreous body is specifically found in the eyes. Okay, controlling homeostasis, we've got to do this very specifically and finitely to make sure that we keep our systems running properly. We do this by the nervous system for the most part for quick changes. And then the endocrine system that we see releasing hormones will also help to counteract any imbalances that happen to show up. So if we happen to have a little too much sugar, hopefully our pancreas kicks in and we're able to take care of that. We do this mostly through feedback systems. These feedback systems contain three basic components: receptors, control center, and effector. So receptors simply meaning we are monitoring the changes, so we notice when something is going to happen. Control center is going to be the brain for the most part, saying, okay, we have noticed the change that is going on and we are going to decide what to do with it. The effector is actually going to be the output of the brain, telling the body how to control this change. Okay, so this is an example of that, just how everything loops back. Okay, most of the time we see this through a negative feedback system. This simply means we are reversing a change in a controlled condition. So blood pressure is a good example. Here we have body temperature. So body temperature, if we become too hot, we are going to notice this. So our receptors are going to take hold of this because we have temperature receptors in our skin. The nerve cells in the skin and brain are going to notice this and tell the brain, we're too hot, we need to cool down. So temperature regulatory center in the brain is going to cause sweat glands throughout the body to produce and release sweat, so this can cool down the body temperature. Okay, a positive feedback, on the other hand, we are going to strengthen or reinforce this change that has happened to a controlled system. Okay, so we don't see too many of these. The main ones we see are going to be during the birthing process and blood clotting. Okay, so an example here for a positive feedback system. During the birthing process, once the cervical wall has stretched to a certain amount, the body says it's time for birth, and the uterus will start contracting. The way to continue these contractions is going to be through oxytocin release from the pituitary gland. So we continually release the oxytocin to continue the contractions. So the change that has happened is the cervical wall has stretched, oxytocin is released, and we're continuing that release of oxytocin until the baby is birthed and we no longer need to contract, and then we shut down and actually have a negative feedback system.